In our time, it seems the American government is vast compared to what the Founding Fathers set out to create. Since then, we have gained a lot of land and taken on a lot of new responsibilities. And at the end of World War II, it was clear that our old way of demobilizing our military and drawing down forces was one that was antiquated and not effective anymore. Why did the American government build itself into a vast military-industrial complex? This was the term first coined by Eisenhower to refer to the gigantic military with a full-time industry behind it. It's the metaphorical apparatus in which we continued our military readiness during peace. In the history of this country, after every war, we draw down our military to save money and increase civil security. After the Civil War, the country was still mostly agricultural, with industrial centers in the north.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government.
But there was no full-time military armaments industry to speak of. After World War I, the country went back into isolation, all hoping that the war to end all wars would do just that, and that there would be no more fighting, and therefore no reason to continue a full-time armaments industry. However, that wasn't to be true. Fascism replaced democracy, and free people everywhere were enslaved. As the country slept, a great enemy loomed just over the horizon. And only the sneak attack at Pearl Harbor spurred the country into action like no time before. With conflicts on both sides of the world, society was to be changed forever. The end result was militarization of the United States with the special flavor, one of technological superiority. We should have regular weapon manufacturers in full-time operation. It should be a system that incorporates the best and the brightest of both education and innovation of weapon systems.
We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The systems only got bigger and bigger and more complex. The best example of them getting out of control was in the conflict in Vietnam. More bombs were dropped there than in all of World War II. Some technologies were not properly tested and were deployed anyway to cost the lives of countless American GIs.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
After the Cold War, the military-industrial complex seemed to be doomed, but found a new enemy in the Muslim extremists in the Middle East and Asia. In both good and bad, the military-industrial complex made us what we are today.